Hello, I'm Scott Wrighton. I serve as Decatur City Manager, and it's my pleasure to bring you these weekly updates on what's going on in your city government. As you may have heard in other media, at the last City Council meeting on Tuesday the 7th, a newest member of the City Council was seated. His name is Dennis Cooper. He was appointed to fill the unexpired portion of Rodney Walker's term, which will end in April of 23. And so he participated in the rest of that meeting, and we look forward to working with him as the City Council moves forward from here. One of the actions that the City Council took at their September 7th City Council meeting was to take action to authorize the demolition of 36 structures around the city. In all cases, these are structures and properties that the City of Decatur does not own. And so there's this legal process we have to go through, either to foreclose or to demonstrate that the property is derelict enough or it's been burned out or whatever the criteria is to warrant legal action by the City of Decatur, oftentimes contrary to the wishes of the owner. In many cases, the owner is simply absent or derelict, is not participating in the process. In some cases, they are protesting or fighting the city, but in all cases, these are structures that are not fit for human habitation, have been damaged in such a way that they cannot be restored, and they simply need to be removed from the neighborhood. And there's a fairly lengthy legal process we have to go through to do that. The City Council has taken very important and definitive steps to make this possible by authorizing more than $2 million in additional funds to support demolition, debris removal, and acquisition where it's necessary to clean out some of these structures that have long passed the stage of being rehabable or recoverable in some way and just have to be demolished in the best interests of public safety and the redevelopment of the neighborhood. Back in 2019, the Howard G. Buffett Foundation graciously provided $1 million to sort of provide seed money for the demolition process that the city pursues, and before the end of this fall, we'll have gone through all of those funds. And so this additional $2 million allotment provided by the mayor and city council is very important and will help us not only keep the pace with demolitions, but actually increase the pace with demolitions. One of the other actions taken by the city council on the 7th was to pass two ordinances that together will provide a new tax, we call it a 1 cent video push tax. Each time you press the button to make a new wager in these video gaming machines, there's a 1 cent tax. Now, this needs to be considered in its larger context. There's a large amount of video gaming and gambling going on in the city of Decatur, and that's what people choose to do with their disposable income. That's their decision. But the city council's long-range goal is to say, listen, government has a cost, and while we certainly need to be economizing whenever we can and looking for efficiencies everywhere we can, there's a limit, there's a reasonable limit to how much we can ask people to pay property taxes or utility taxes or food and beverage taxes, three of the largest general fund taxes that the city relies on for its basic operations and which people complain about because they're perceived as too high or going up. And so while we can't eliminate these taxes, I think the council is very keen to say, okay, maybe we can at least plateau it or maybe take it down just a little bit. But if we do that, we have to find alternative revenues that aren't as painful as property taxes, utility taxes, and food and beverage taxes. So looking at a 1 cent tax on each bet that might bring in as much as $750,000 or more is a strategy to say if we can come up with alternative revenues to pay the bills for city services, then that will enable us to be much more disciplined and much more conservative in the approach to some of these other traditional or what I call legacy taxes. The average citizen of Decatur probably doesn't realize that the city government itself only represents about 15 to 16% of the total tax levy. Here at summertime, where it's late summer now, people pay their tax bills in July and in September each year, and so it's in everybody's mind about their property tax. Well, in most communities, at least half of that property tax is levied by the local school district, not by the city. I'm surprised sometimes of how much people say, well, my taxes went up again. Well, in fact, although in most of Decatur there are 11 separate jurisdictions that charge and levy property taxes, all but one of them pretty much during the pandemic held the line, kept it flat because of how pandemic was affecting the economy. Only the Decatur Public Schools increased their rate by about 7%. So with all the rest of them being fairly close to zero. The Decatur Public Schools is always the largest portion, the largest piece of the pie in your property tax bill, followed by the city, the Park District, and by Macon County. Those are the four largest property tax leviers. And we're only about 15 to 16% of the total. But we want to make sure that we don't grow that number, and if possible, not even grow the actual number that we have to levy. And the way to do that is to find alternative revenues. And this was one of the things that I think Council saw as a real possibility for doing that. My discussions with you each week would not be complete without talking about the situation with COVID. The number of new infections here in Macon County has decreased a little bit from the high level that they have been at, but I cannot emphasize enough that the numbers are still too high. The daily numbers have come down a little bit, but they are still higher than they should be, and it makes the use of masks, and particularly, in fact, even more than masks, I think, is the importance of getting vaccinated. Macon County's rate of vaccination is below the counties around us, and we, along with many other jurisdictions, are trying to encourage and incentivize people to get the vaccine because it is your best defense against getting the virus. Many of our local businesses have developed their own protocols for staying safe, and we understand and value the fact that what works for one business, maybe a restaurant, may not be appropriate for another business, an office, or a gym or something like that. Those different work environments naturally would require different sorts of requirements for social distancing or for cleanliness, or when masks are required and when you're socially distanced enough that you might not need them. And for the most part, I've been fairly impressed that a lot of our local businesses are trying very hard, not only because they want to follow the rules of the governor's most recent order on August 26th, but also because they simply want to protect their customers and the citizens of Macon County. So there was a healthy discussion about this at the City Council meeting on the 7th. The City Council is desirous of making sure that everybody stays safe, but the level of enforcement, especially for masks, is a topic of much debate, and some people feel very strongly about it on both sides. And so the city's position remains that we should be following the governor's order, that masks should be worn indoors, especially when you can't socially distance, and that we will respond to complaints where we think that a business or some other indoor location has been particularly egregious about not paying attention to these sorts of things. Historically, extending back into 2020, the city was principally focused on those establishments that it issued amusement and liquor licenses to. And we've also paid some attention to those businesses that have been the recipients of small business assistance through this COVID period. But at the end of the day, what I really want to say to you is, besides be healthy and follow the rules, is be safe and encourage others to do the same, because that's how we're going to get through this pandemic and bring those numbers down. I look forward to talking to you next week with some more information about your city government. Thanks.